Hey everyone, it's Elizabeth Mays, and welcome to The Creative Voice, a creativity focused podcast exploring what being a creative person is really like. Hear from local voices in their own words in the city of Detroit.
And I'm Danny Wu, the co-host of the show.
So during the day, I publish books, I run a blog called Umami Detroit, and I lead my family's 79 years in printing empire, Mays Multimedia.
And I'm a creative strategist and visual designer working locally. I currently teach at Wayne State's graphic design department.
This series is brought to you in partnership with the Detroit chapter of AIGA, also known as the American Institute for Graphic Arts, a volunteer-based membership organization that advocates for creative professionals.
And as always, be sure to follow us on social for updates on events. That's through Instagram with @thecreativevoicepod. So that's the Creative Voice POD. And you can also subscribe to us through our link tree in our bio on Instagram as well.
Danny, tell us, who do we have on the studio today?
I'm really excited. I want to introduce Eden. I've admired you for a long time, not just because of a creative force in the field, but also being someone who is a woman in the field and also running your own business with your partner. Like, that is really inspirational. So how did it get started?
Oh, shucks. Well, firstly, I just want to say thank you for having me here today with two very equally incredible women. Love this podcast, love what you're doing, and I'm just grateful to be here, be invited. My name is Eden Sabolboro, she, her, and I am the co-founder of Real Clever Films. We are an immigrant-owned, woman-owned, and minority-owned, clearly, production company based in Metro Detroit. My husband, who is my favorite cinematographer, and of course, biases very much included.
Fair.
We met in film school, right? We met in film school, fell in love. He grew up in Michigan, and surprise, surprise, he brought back a wife. And so that sort of began this creative adventure that we've had, I would say, for the past 12 or so years now. I think more than that. But yeah, we fell in love with each other. Also with the similar paradigm in terms of storytelling and filmmaking. We really wanted to hone in on human interest stories. I found out that, very quickly, that we love the same kind of cinematography, the same aesthetic, the same films, that kickstarted this very long-term collaborative creative partnership that we've had with each other. When we moved here in 2014 as a brand new immigrant from the Philippines, it was tremendously difficult, of course. Coming to the US, back in the Philippines, I had a pretty good media career, if I'm going to be very honest. I was in radio for a really long time. And so I was a radio personality in the city that I was in. And then I started branching out into other forms of media. And so I had a fashion blog, which I don't know if you guys remember was huge in the 2010s. But the fashion blogging sphere was very much a thing back then. And so I had that. I branched out into styling. And so I had phenomenal relationships with all the designers in my city, for the most part. But then I settled into film. I did theater. I did a lot of theater as well. And I started out as an actor, firstly. I've experienced all of it. You know what I mean? And as we moved here, going back to that story of moving here, I was pregnant, did not know how to navigate the US at all, possibly sent about, dozens, I could not count the applications that I've sent in, Googled every single, production company, Googled agencies, production companies, anywhere that I could potentially get my foot in the door. I'd be lucky if I got a response. And so, really starting from the bottom, right? We had retail jobs, we had utility job, any job that we could get as an immigrant, especially from a developing country. That's kind of, I guess, part of the experience. And so we did that for a while, but we kind of had the instinct that, like, look, even though it's going to be an uphill battle, we have to give it a good shot. We got to give it a try. We've got nothing to lose. Nobody knows us in Metro Detroit. And so if we just give it all we've got, kind of fake it till we make it. Hey, that's kind of like the mantra of, the creative realm. And so, we started the business. We started Real Clever Films. And part of that, I would say success. So part of that journey of getting to be where we are now is, of course, it's all about the creative community of Detroit. And I think I should mention, obviously, that 2014, right? 2014, 2015, if anyone could remember that time, the city, the state, went through such a ringer with back to back
Right.
hits, negative hits, right? We got the bankruptcy. We got all obviously the incentives left not long before that. And I remember distinctly being in Cebu, Philippines, because that's where I'm from. My husband would be like, "Oh my gosh, so when we get to Detroit, like, everything's shot there now. Man of Steel, the Transformers series, all of it is shot there now and we'll get PA jobs." And so, we were like, yes, that my excitement was definitely built up. When we got here, all of that was gone.
The film incentives, yes.
For our industry, bales of hay were rolling. It was a very crippling time for a lot of people. And so we were like, okay, what are we gonna do? The industry's not here. Let's drive to LA, stay in our car until we get, we had that filmmaker's dream, which I think a lot of, when you're really ambitious and don't have kids, is a thing that you can easily just like, yes, you know what, let me do that. But then, finding out when we got here that I was pregnant was that, so that was like a thing that could not be possible. And so we kind of just stuck around. We stuck around, met the industry folks that stayed behind and met the community that really was like, you know what? We're kind of in the aftermath of, all of these things that happened. What can we do, right? What can we do? We're not moving. We're staying in Detroit.
Yeah.
We're gonna just hold the line and stay the course and just be there for each other. And it was like just a lovely environment to come into because everyone that we've met, I remember, we would go to these, we would Google networking events or anywhere, that we could meet creatives, right? And we would bring our baby. We had our baby with us, and
Wow.
oh, you guys are so cute. Like, you're a production company, and be like, yes, with all the Delulu energy. Like, yes, we are. Here's our card.
Sometimes you gotta be Delulu.
Here's a few things, and it all just kind of started. I think people just kind of really saw what we were trying to do. And if you're involved in the video production world at that time, especially, right, before the Tubies was around, so before all of this, before the rise, like truly, like 2015, 2016, 2017 was kind of before the rise of all the democratization that is happening with all the access to filmmaking that's available now was like not a thing back then. Things just really ramped up like the past few years. Cameras got cheaper. So back in that time when we were really starting to kind of figure out Detroit and what that means for us, like we bought our first DSLR. And I remember we bought like a Rode, like an on DSLR Rode camera, which was like maybe $150. And we were like, this is an achievement. As an immigrant who literally had no credit like 2 months before, like that I remember finding that one tiny microphone. Like, oh, like we started from this tiny.
Was it a lavalier?
It was not. It was a Rode. Like it stays on top of a DSLR. Like I'm thinking that that was sufficient for what we were doing, but I was like, you know what? Like you gotta really take stock of where you came from, and so that's sort of like the backstory, right? And I think when I talk about that, it does make me emotional because it's not a cliche that folks like me go through that experience and sort of, oh, like the odds are really stacked up against you, but you just have to keep going. And again, with the help of everyone in the community that was like, oh, you guys are really nice, like they're looking for like a producer cinematographer type, let me connect you to that person. And you can definitely in Detroit is specifically is really that care that we have for each other and really that air of like support and that air of grit, right? Like people, we got each other is really sort of like the vibe that we got you. So one thing led to another, and we started with one small client. Then it's like, oh, okay. We quickly figured out we could not compete in the auto, the very typical. I mean, love them, respect their work, obviously, but it's such a closed off community, and especially if you're breaking in. And so we were like, okay, why don't we do? We went back to what we cared about, right? We wanted human interest stories. We wanted stories that represent authentic human experiences. And a lot of that storytelling was happening for sure at that time where people were like, we're starved to tell our own stories. We can kind of, I think we could lean into documentary. I think we could lean into, again, that sort of nonfiction, but very community focused storytelling. So we kind of, we did one thing to another to where we are now, where since then we've received a couple of we've got a couple Emmy, like when you look back on that journey of like, man, like if you really stay the course, you might get somewhere. We're definitely a manifestation of that, is if there's one takeaway for creatives who are listening to this. So that's the long end of sort of the backstory.
Well, you know what's so beautiful is like, yes, the manifestation is very, very important, but in order to even get to the manifestation, you literally sat and lived so many different roles. Like you said, actor, you did blogging, styling, film, podcast, theater. Like all of that background literally makes you a multimedia mogul.
Right.
And I'm just gonna put it out there.
I appreciate you, Elizabeth. No, really, I mean, something that I quickly realized, right? I'm sure, we're all creatives. We've all thought about this at some point or another. Is that you kind of have to be obsessed. You kind of have to be continuously like, I'm not the best at this. I'm always going to keep learning. And what can I do to learn? And so that particular paradigm of thinking is really important when you're a director or a producer, because you're running sets, you're running groups of people all at once, and you're sort of like managing
Right.
the client creative relationship. And so to your point, it's like you're navigating so many voices, you're navigating so many dynamics, and like that's the only way you're going to succeed in this industry, is in the very least having a sense of understanding what people care about in their work. And I can, let me understand what the lighting department is doing. Let me understand, the rudimentary like camera work, and that will give people the confidence too, like, oh, you really know what you're talking about. To your point, you've done all of these things to survive. Try and learn as much as you can.
And you know what? I think someone like yourself, and I even see myself in you too when you're speaking, someone who has worked in so many different roles and industries, but that's all still interrelated to multimedia. I think there's a difference between someone who stays in a particular role and and perfects that and is only known by this, doesn't necessarily always get to go down an entrepreneurial business owner path. I feel like business owners and entrepreneurs are the ones who literally have either cleaned the toilets as a janitor, someone who has served in customer service, someone who has literally been in the background in pre-production, someone who's writing and doing, editing, someone who's literally that has touched into every role, because that's the only way that you can also respect everyone that you're bringing on, right? And it brings me to this question that I actually wrote. It was like question number 3, but it's actually going to be question number 1. Is you said, and I quote on one of your Facebook posts, I mean your Instagram posts, there is no other medium more collaborative than filmmaking. And you went on and named prominent colleagues and then different roles. So what my question is what role do you think is most underrepresented that if anyone is interested in getting into film should know more about? Like what other role is like just as vital as the producer that I think that doesn't get enough credit?
I appreciate you looking into my Instagram posts, Elizabeth. But no, I mean, that's a really, really great question. And I would say maybe not as underrepresented, because there's a lot of practitioners of this in the field. And I'm speaking from experience, obviously. But, I think a role that is more unsung, or like sort of like say the thankless job, is definitely the producing role. When you talk to every single film student, right? You go to a film school. Oh, I want to be a cinematographer. I'm the next big cinematographer. I'm the next big director. I'm also like the next big Tarantino. Like everyone is always leaning into the visual aspect of film, and that's well and good. Like that's great. Obviously, like the film sings because of all these creative elements, but it's a lot of it doesn't happen without a good producer. Like I'm just gonna say that. And I've had the great fortune to like do like production workshops and be in universities, be in colleges. I like taught at CCS for a semester. I was a professor for a while, and I do teach pretty frequently, and I mentor pretty frequently, and that's something that I sort of almost drill down,
Oh shoot. Okay, let me add professor to your list too. Okay.
where it's like it's great that we want to, and a lot of times you see the issues bubble up when you're seeing that the producing wasn't airtight or wasn't flawless. And so for me, producing is not necessarily like having the, to be honest with you, like learning how to put out fires, learning how to put out fires and learning how to navigate those fires. Because the things that we see on TV, the films, the television, like the series that we love, like they just don't happen overnight just because of creativity. They happen because of a lot of planning, a lot of logistical execution. And it's really, really helpful to succeed in this industry and to be respected in speaking that language. And so, with all of the aspiring filmmakers out there, really like hone in on that producing, even if you don't necessarily want to be a producer. You just want to learn how to navigate what does development mean, what does pre-production mean, what does going into production mean. And a lot of times the actual shooting of the film, the filmmaking aspect of it, that's the easiest. It's really the steps that you take before you get there that you really have to learn to navigate. And I think if you're an incredible creative and you know how to navigate that, there's nothing stopping you. You're probably going to be incredible in the project that you're going to be doing in the future.
I think sometimes people are just so focused on one role. A little tidbit. I went to school for film. I don't really talk up. I did. I studied film. I studied film, video, and media up at Western Michigan University, and I knew then I wanted to be a continuity director. My counselor really dope. Her name is Marilyn Chrisman. I want to give her a little shout out. She was the one that brought me into the room, and I was like, if I get this degree, like, what do I do? And she's like, let me show you. And she pulled out this huge poster, and it had 50 to 100 roles that you can have with graduating with this major. And when I saw that, my eyes just like lit up, and I was like, because all you hear is about, are you going to do lighting or writing, or are you going to be a director or a producer? And that's normally what you normally hear. And for me, I wanted to make sure that when I graduated, I had more of a specific desire in mind. And then, of course, I knew everything else that was out there.
Yeah. And also say when I say producing too, I'm also speaking about all of the, to your point, all of the other roles that fall under the producing role. Associate producers, impact producers. There's actually so many, but they get stuff done. All of these little details and all these little tasks that get to be done.
100%. 100%. Okay, so for the audience that is listening, that is hearing about you and your grit and your character and where you came from, let's talk about what have you created. Like, I want them to be able to get on Google or a streaming service and be able to pull this up. So tell us about Make Way for Tomorrow.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So Senghor Reid, Make Way for Tomorrow, is a short film that I co-directed with a very good friend, Desmond Love. He's phenomenal.
Love both of them. Love both of
You
them.
know what I mean? And yes, Detroit icons, obviously. My production company, of course, was produced the whole thing. I was the executive, I was the lead producer. And this was a film that was done for and with American Masters. Let me just backtrack real quick and give you a bit of a background on that. So, in Detroit, I've really, a lot of my work has really been with collaborating with artists and again with the community. And that sort of then led me to working with the Kresge Arts in Detroit organization. I mean, we love them, obviously. Like, they do such a great job supporting artists wherever they are in their career. And since 2019, I've done quite a number. I've directed, and the production companies produced quite a number of the artist films that come out from that experience, from the fellowship. I think almost like maybe 30 now. And, we did, so every year, there was an eminent artist, Shirley Woodson, Gloria House, that have received, sort of the larger grant they don't have to apply for. We did that straight for about 3 years. And again, a lot of the fellowships, a lot of the artists that got the fellowships, we did a bunch of films on them. And so that led me on the track of like, really honing in on what it is to make a film about an artist, to tell stories about other artists and other creatives in their practice, like at the moment. And so, this thing kind of came up with Firelight Media. I don't know if you guys know them, but they're phenomenal. They support, artists, filmmakers of color to be able to do the films that they want to do. And so, and really connecting them to industry, like larger industry resources. And I was fortunate to have been selected to join a lab with them in 2018. And from that lab, came this like internal invite to do a major artist film for PBS, to be a part of the digital offshoot of American Masters, a long-standing program on PBS that chronicles the lives of like the big artists in America. And so in the making was their digital offshoot that started in the pandemic. And so the goal was to pair up emerging BIPOC filmmakers, directors, producers with a future American master. So like, somebody that's on the way there, but not quite yet. There was an internal invitation I pitched. And at that point, because again, having done the film on Miss Shirley Woodson, the great Miss Shirley Woodson, I met Senghor Reid and developed, friendship and love his work, obviously. And so, I had a maybe like a 4 artists that were on my short list to propose, to do this pitch around. And I chose Senghor because his work was just personally resonated with me and was just so calming, and like loved his viewpoint as an artist. And I think I needed something that was not just aesthetically pleasing but also just tackled like politics and tackled social issues from a different lens. And so I was all in. I pitched it. I was like, this is the film that I want to do. Pitched that film, and we got it. Got the film, did the film. Literally shot the film when I was maybe about 6 to 7 months pregnant, maybe. And literally when we finished the film, I literally gave birth to two babies. When we did the, sort of like the internal, rough cut review, I was maybe like 8 months pregnant. And so Big Sky, I brought my 2 month old baby. And so he's been, we're definitely that family. Like, we're gonna go to a festival, the entire family is gonna be there. And it was so cute because the baby was like the star, because he was crying all over the venue, and it was so cute. So yes, it premiered at Big Sky in February of 2023. And since then, it's kind of, and we just wrapped, I would say, the festival run for it. But it had a really, I'm really proud of the run that it made. I mean, obviously it's up on PBS, which, if you guys can link it so that people can see it, it's up on PBS. But it also had a phenomenal like festival run. It went to like places like Docklands. It went to a couple of Academy qualifying festivals, and eventually, in sort of at the tail end of that run, some pretty big things happened. So we submitted it to the Emmys, to the Michigan Emmys for consideration. Surprise, surprise! It got the Emmy that year. It's literally the second Emmy that I have that I wasn't there in person. I'm like, why does this keep happening to me at this point? And I was kind of like making a joke, like at this point, I'm probably gonna win the daytime Emmy, the prime time. But I would say the biggest surprise that I received was it being nominated for the Webby Awards. And so the Webby Award, the National Webby Awards. And so the Webby Awards, obviously for creatives, is it's a really prestigious award body, right? For work that was created for the internet or with the internet. And so, I would say it's a major consideration to have been the films that were nominated next to it. We were nominated for documentary long form. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. It's like 13 minutes. But all of the other documentaries that were nominated next to it, like, all had like huge industry premieres.
Woohoo! Yes.
And it was nominated also next to The Last Repair Shop. If you guys are not familiar, The Last Repair Shop won the Oscar for Best Short Documentary in 2023. And I went to New York, saw it, cry, bawled. Like, if we lose to that, it's okay. It was only 5 films total. And to have literally been nominated for an award next to a literal Oscar winner for that year was something I did not anticipate at all. I was like, oh, this is wild. Is something that we're incredibly proud about. Right after Senghor Reid, Make Way for Tomorrow, we did another short film, this time a narrative. It's called Well. And Well was funded by Black Public Media and Nice. I have to like look back and on their acronym, but I'm like, oh, this is cool. And just trying to stay the course. And again, waiting for the next pitch, waiting for the next project, and we take it day by day. But those two projects we're incredibly proud about.
Okay, resume top tier. And you know what? I was gonna have Danny ask the next question, but lovely enough, you are finishing your conversations or your questions with statements. Yes, it's such a good one. So let me ask this question, and this was one of them. You talk about anxiety and self-imposter syndrome. Who was the guiding light to help you put the spotlight back on you?
Ooh, oh, we're going deep here. I You know what? So I'm one of those people clearly that I don't really like, even I've had a couple of like really lovely press interviews recently, and I'm so grateful for them. And I always point it back to like, look, like, this is great that you're doing a profile on me, but it's really not about me. Because again, for me, it's always about the work, right? If I'm doing the work that I really want to do and I'm really passionate about with the stories that I really want to spread to the world, I'm doing a great job. That's sort of the it for me. And for me, it's like that's always like my grounding force is like, I'm grounded by the fact that like, you know what, it's really not about me, it's about this project, and it's about the team behind this project. I always remind like the press, like, look, it's great that you want to write about me, but know that this is a team effort. And I always think back on the people that maybe look up to me, like the some of the kids that I mentor, and the younger members on my team, if they see me kind of talking this way about myself, is probably not, I don't want them to ever do that to themselves. I mean, obviously another grounding thing for me is my family, right? My husband, who's again my creative partner, my cinematographer, he's we always make a joke with the people that know us, is like, I'm the one that speaks a lot. He hardly speaks at all. He's very introverted and he lets the work speak for himself. The team that I have, him and like my Amanda, my producer on my team, and a couple other team members as well, they're always just reminding me that, look, it may seem that we're not reaching where we are, because I'm always thinking about that, right? I'm always like, okay, that was cool, but we're done. What do we do next? I think that's such a, I'm done. Like, what's the next project? Like, the cycle of film is very, you're constantly reminded. I have peers that made it to Sundance, and that's sort of like, that's like a goalpost for a lot of us. I'm definitely that person. I'm like, oh, we're not reaching this goalpost. My team, my husband, they're really good at reminding me that, like, look, where we are now and what you've accomplished, especially knowing what we've been through, you gotta take stock of that. You gotta really stop and appreciate the work, and, like, balance, like, self-reflection, balance just appreciating yourself and how you've carried yourself. I'm definitely in the era of, like, you know what? And thank you to my therapist as well. I'm in the era of, like, you know what? If the next project comes along maybe a little bit later, that's okay. Somebody also told me, you're meant to be in the rooms that you're in. She was like, oh, I'm so intimidated because I've only really personally started to come out of my shell in terms of, oh, like, we want to be in New York, we want to be in LA, we want to be where the industry is, and so, having these meetings and going there, and it's like, it's very intimidating. When I think that happens when you're putting yourself out in any situation. This is me, this is my work, I'm here now. And a friend told me, like, if you're in a room right now, you're meant to be there. You were there for a reason and you deserve to be there.
100%. Oof. I'm just like, man, I got another question, but I want to make sure Danny chime in.
Like, I think you're really thoughtful and very deliberate about the projects that the production company takes on. And I think the intention of being an artist first is very clear. I think being committed to doing what's next. We're perfectionists, but we're also always a work in progress as creative people. So it really helps to understand that mindset as a director. And, you just mentioned Sundance. And my actual question was like, what's on your bucket list of something that you would want to do, or a big project that you want to, accomplish someday?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good question. I am developing my first feature documentary. I've been working on this feature document, and a lot of my films, I mean, actually all of my films. I mean, I've jumped on producing teams for big, documentary projects, but I've never directed a feature length project. For me, I've been seriously in development for this project. Actually, I would say we're in early production. I've been working on a music documentary. My background being in music and having been in radio for a really good chunk of my life, I really love music. I'm a stickler for a good music documentary. And so I'm working on a music documentary on the Filipino American experience, and specifically on the Filipino wave of musicians that were a thing in the late 90s. They had record deals, they charted on Billboard. You know what I mean? I don't know if you guys have seen, New Wave by Elizabeth I, but that's she did something similar and it's out in the circuit right now, but it's for the, Vietnamese community. But for me, it really was to shine a light on my own community and, like, the people that I cared about. And so, I'm profiling a few big celebrities in this thing, and I got access to them. I can't divulge it yet because it's not out in the world, but I've been going to, like, the West Coast a lot just to have meetings, and New York to have meetings. But yeah, my hope is to lock some very big stars for this. I have a couple already that I've just, established a relationship with. And a lot of it is really just the Lulu. So my executive producer, I'm just gonna shout her out because she's amazing. Her name is Cecilia Mejia. She is an award-winning Filipino American producer who's based in New York, and she's produced a few, marquee, like, films, like both narrative and documentary. And I literally just slid in her D. I was like, who are my do I want Olivia Rodrigo in this thing? Because something that I realize is a lot of times it really is just it's gumption. It's really like just the guts to go for it and just be like, I want this person to be in this thing. I'll find the way. You know what I mean? And so I literally slid in my I slid in her LinkedIn messages and I was like, look, you don't know me right now, but I want you to be the executive producer of my film. And I went to New York, met her, and the rest is history. You know what I mean? So, it nothing is off the limits. I feel like again, we live in the era where celebrity Rihanna can respond to you in the comment section. You have to just go for it and just like, not let the negativity tell you otherwise that you can't do it.
You really can't. Like I recall when I was the artist coordinator for Illinois Soup, which is a division of Detroit Soup, and I'm in my role. And every event my responsibility was to source a new artist. And this was in my young days, baby. This was back 2013. And I remember one day I was like, okay, I want a poet. I want a poet for today. I mean, for this, next month's event. And I just started Googling and I asked a friend, I was like, yo, I'm looking for some poets. And she started mentioning several poets. And then she also mentioned Jessica Care Moore. I didn't know who Jessica Care Moore was at this time. So I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, I'm going to reach out to Jessica. I immediately closed the chat. I reached out to Jessica. I was like, hey, my name is Elizabeth Mays. I'm the artist coordinator for Illinois Soup. This was also my community time where I was literally so heavily involved in the community. And I was like, I want to know if you would be interested in doing some readings for Livernois Soup. Our artist stipend is $100. Blah, 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 blah. She responds and she's like, hey, nice to meet you. She says, the stipend? She said, let me just tell you what I normally perform for. And I was like, whoa. And she says, but the energy that you have surrounding this project, I will come and I will perform for you guys. And so after she told me her stipend, what she would normally perform for, I Googled her and I was like, oh my God, I did not know who I was inboxing. But it really takes you being Delulu and so passionate about whatever it is that you're doing that you're not thinking about how untouchable somebody is or what their rate is. It's about the collaboration and the idea. So, like the listeners, whatever industry you are in when it comes down to creative practice, just like my girl Issa Rae said, sometimes you have to go lateral. You have to, you want to work and collaborate with people that you either aspire to be like, or either that's already connected to where you can actually go, right? And I just reached out to my friend and she's over here mentioning names and I'm over here, Jessica Care Moore is reading to my entire audience. And I think we ended up kicking the stipend up to like 150. It wasn't much compared to what she said her base was.
The writer's room for that show, Insecure, amazing. I don't know if both of you have seen the behind the scenes when the show ended in the final season, but they actually had a very long featurette, and she talked about how prior to her being in that writer's room and creating her own show, people had come up to her and said, "Hey, I've like staff written before, but I've never been surrounded by this many women of color in a writer's room at all." And she ended up creating a program specifically for women to actually write. So I'm pretty sure now that she has at least like 18 people came out of that writing program throughout the different seasons of Insecure, and now there are actual writers in Hollywood. But before that time, they had no experience or connection that could really pull them to that level.
Say too, speaking of Issa Rae, something that, going back to the question on grounding, right? And like, what do you do to really ground yourself from like away from like the insecurity, the imposter syndrome? Is like, she said this like phenomenal thing. Like, as women of color, like, we should not stay humble. If we need to talk about, sometimes humility is like, it's kind of detrimental for you because, and I say that because like a really good friend of mine, she's an influencer, and so she's been like, girl, this and that, you need your presence, blah blah blah, social, like, but she kind of raised this point of like, look, like, if you increase your presence out there, if you sort of really dive in and like, look, become like a person who, like, really has a social media like plan or whatever, influencing and all of that, you also don't know who you're impacting. You don't know that there's like little Edens out there who are needing to see someone like you. And so, girl, like, you've done a lot. Like, put that out there, like,
Put it out there.
I hate even talking about like any sort of bragging or, to even lead to anything like that. But she made that point, and that was like, you know what? if there's somebody out there that will see, if there's one person that watches my story that like, could relate to the journey and sort of is inspired by it and is propelled to want to do something with their career, then she may have a point. So, I think I think we're all living in this era of like we need to stop playing small. And I think that's sort of what I'm still trying to get out of that paradigm that like it's okay. It's okay to shout through the rooftops. It's okay to talk about your work. It's okay to be proud about it. Because if it means that someone like myself is gonna look to that.
Ooh, come on, come on. We love Aisa.
Look at her, you know what I mean? And I really look up to her for that because I feel like, a lot of the things that we do at Real Clever is really based on the idea of like, look, we're very lucky to have, I mean, obviously we had to really pay our dues and really like work from the ground up to be able to get to where we are today and like our cute environment that we've cultivated. But it's also, a lot of it is it's opening doors. I'm not out here trying to brag about what I'm doing, but if I can open a door for somebody and encourage them that look, there's other people like yourself who are doing this thing, owning companies and like doing films they really love and doing it on their own terms, then we've done something. And so at Real Clever, that's really something that we're very conscious about is how do we make this industry because it's all about how the struggles that we've gone through. Oh, like, a lot of rooms is like guess what? It's me. I'm the one person, or me and another friend or something would be the only people of color. And it really is a matter of like, how do we cultivate the space, right? That we're able to like include as many people as possible, and we operate with that ethos, and we've done that since day one.
That's such a wonderful way to end this, honestly, because I feel like I don't really have any questions. All of my questions are pretty much answered.
So I was all over your Instagram. I'm an IG girl. I feel like my Instagram is like a gateway into like really kind of getting an idea of what Elizabeth does and who she is. And when I was all over yours, I was inspired how you weave fashion, individuality, grace, and photography together so well.
Vogue Philippines.
Vogue Philippines!
When I saw that, the photo shoot was so good. I was like, yeah.
Appreciate you so much. A shout out to the local team that really spearheaded that, and shout out to Coup d'etat Detroit, Angela, who's phenomenal. That's a fashion girl's dream store. I'm just gonna say that. Full endorsement and full stop. Again, like I lived the 2010s fashion girl. I love seeing all the millennial content coming up. I'm sure, let me know if you guys feel the same way of like, oh, these are the boots we wore. Oh, these I was like,
Yeah.
our fashion was so unserious. I was a true fashion girl. I was like the DIY, very 2010s millennial coded. I was that girl. I've never stopped loving fashion. I'm always trying to figure the voice out. I feel like on social media now everyone's like, I'm this or I'm that. And I'm like, how do I tell people that I'm a very serious like filmmaker, but also very unserious person? Like you can kick it with me, but also like love fashion. Let's try to figure this out. But also like doing it in a way that like I need to get out of my head. I need to stop overthinking. Guess what, girl? Like people don't really care. Like we live in an era where we're all doing something. You just do it. I have so many like posts that I want to do, but I sit on it forever and I'm like, you know what? No. To your point, it's fine to be unserious these days. Like,
And you're a documentary filmmaker, so you're living that life, and which I think is really authentic anyway. It's just this is who you are, and this is also how you approach creating stories with people, and you want it to be genuine. So that's just a really wonderful way.
I think I'm just trying to relate that this is who I am. This is not quite the fashion girl. I'm not quite just a film girl, but guess what? I'm a little unserious. I want to be as vulnerable as possible and just be like, we're all living such curated lives on social media that it's like, when I'm there, how do I make it count? What are the things to say? And maybe sometimes the things to say is not really anything at all. That's what my friend is always telling me is like, girl, you're overthinking this thing. Just be you, just be real. Be unserious, be serious. We're all in there now. That's okay.
I mean, that and it's like gatekeeping is kind of a thing that I feel doesn't exist as much in Detroit versus other
Yeah.
towns just because of our industry and how close knit we are. I mean, you talked about, 2015 and you talk about the stuff that's happened over the course of the pandemic. I find that creative people, we still pull through, we still care, and we still want to care in spite of everything.
And that was going to be my question, is that you weave all of these things, fashion, individuality, grace, and photography so well. When you're posting, what is it that you're trying to relate to your audience?
I'm never gonna do something that doesn't feel genuine to me. That's the only, if there's, to your point, Danny, if there's one takeaway, is that if I've put it out there, that's the most authentic self. I'm never gonna do anything just for the sake of doing something.
Right. You say, I'm backing what I put out there.
Exactly. I'm standing on business.
Standing on business. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
I mean, human expression is not going to go away regardless of how people feel because they're just going to feel anyway.
We still want to care. Even if we're constantly told that, yeah, we live in a time that people don't care. No, we care. We care very deeply. We're artists. Feel some type of way about anything.
I think a great way to end this would be to, tell our listeners where they can follow you online and to check out your work.
Yeah. So I have my directing website is EdenSabolboro.com. I am both, Eden in the Mitten on Instagram and Real Clever Films for the production company work. I do want to plug that we did open a lovely end-to-end content studio recently that, the goal is to make it as accessible and affordable to the community as possible. Because again, for me, it's all about how do we knock down the barriers, right? Of doing the best work that we can do. And something that I learned is that a lot of these resources are very expensive. And, I know this because we've put in too much money. So when when we opened the studio, we really came into it with the idea of, how do we make incredible equipment, lighting available to the community at, at a cheaper cost. The real studios. I would personally give you a tour if you reach out.
Oh, I would love this. I would actually definitely want to come by ASAP.
Yes, you too are especially welcome, and lunch is on me if you ever come through.
It was great having you, Eden. This was a really wonderful time. For any of our listeners who want to hear more from us and the episode, I'll do a little quick plug. You can follow us on social again at The Creative Voice Pod. You can also email us at thecreativevoicepod@gmail.com if you have any questions. If you want to hear more from Eden or anyone else, feel free to slide into the DMs, as she's mentioned before. We do not gatekeep.
That's the thing. That's the takeaway for the day is you're not gatekeepers. You're so welcome to message us anytime.
Aw, that's what's up. Eden, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening, everyone. And once again, this is The Creative Voice.